Hello there, it's me, Mina. Let's talk about something awkward: climate change. Remember when it was the defining issue of our generation? Now it's faded into background noise. The planet's still heating up, disasters are still happening, but our collective urgency has vanished. Why? Our attention has shifted. Public concern has cooled, marches have thinned, and headlines moved on. It's like we got a terminal diagnosis for the planet, panicked, then went back to binge-watching sitcoms. Ignoring the problem doesn't make it disappear, it just makes the reckoning worse. So why have we shrugged off the world's biggest crisis? Tonight, we'll unpack the psychological, social, and economic reasons behind this global apathy. Grab a drink, preferably in a reusable cup, and let's dive in. Let's start with the obvious. We're all feeling it. That weight on your shoulders, that constant hum of anxiety in the background. It's not just you. We're exhausted, truly, deeply exhausted. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix, because it's not just physical, it's a weariness of the soul. Crisis fatigue is real, a very real phenomenon. It's that feeling of being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of bad news. Pandemics, wars, conflicts raging across the globe, each one demanding our attention, each one chipping away at our reserves of hope. Economic chaos, political toxicity, the constant barrage of negativity online. It's a relentless assault on our mental well-being. Our brains simply can't handle this much dread. There's a limit to how much negativity we can process before we start to shut down. Outrage is finite. We only have so much emotional energy to expend on being angry or upset. So, when climate change knocks, when warnings about rising sea levels and extreme weather events come, our minds are already maxed out. We're running on empty, with no capacity left to fully grasp the magnitude of the problem. We're at the all-you-can-eat buffet of calamity, a never-ending spread of crises and anxieties. And climate change, despite being the most significant long-term threat, is often perceived as the wilted salad next to the flaming entrees of immediate disasters. Immediate crises, pandemics that threaten our health, wars that destabilize nations, recessions that impact our livelihoods, demand our attention, grabbing headlines and dominating our news feeds. Climate change, on the other hand, often feels like a dull ache, a persistent but easily ignored discomfort. So we ignore it, pushing it to the back of our minds, focusing on the more pressing issues of the day. Our brains are fundamentally wired for immediate threats, for the saber-toothed tiger lurking in the shadows, not for slow-moving disasters that unfold over decades, even centuries. So, we disengage. We turn off the news, we avoid the difficult conversations, we try to find some semblance of peace. Not out of malice, not because we don't care, but out of self-preservation, a desperate attempt to protect our sanity. The media, unfortunately, often feeds this cycle, prioritizing sensationalism over substance, chasing novelty and pushing climate change with complex and long-term implications to the background. We've heard doomsday predictions about the climate crisis so often, for so long, we're numb. The constant warnings have lost their impact, blending into the background noise of our lives. When every alarm blares, when every notification screams for our attention, we tune them out. We learn to filter out the noise, to ignore the constant barrage of information. Except one of those alarms is for a real fire, a genuine emergency that demands our immediate action. People are focused on survival, on making ends meet, on providing for their families. Jobs, health, groceries, the everyday necessities that consume our time and energy. It's not a lack of caring about the environment, it's not a conscious decision to ignore the climate crisis, but a lack of capacity, a simple inability to take on yet another burden. We're emotionally overdrawn, our reserves depleted by the constant demands of modern life. And the climate bill, the urgent need for action on climate change, keeps getting deferred, pushed further down the list of priorities. Climate change is a terrible movie villain. It lacks the immediate visceral threat that grabs our attention. It doesn't have a face, a name, or a clear motive that we can easily understand and rally against. Instead, it's a slow, creeping menace that unfolds over decades, making it difficult to perceive and even harder to fight. Slow, abstract, invisible. It's a problem that's difficult to grasp, shrouded in complex scientific data and long-term projections. If an asteroid were hitting next week, we'd mobilize. We'd see the immediate danger, the clear and present threat to our existence, and we'd act decisively to protect ourselves. Resources would be poured into finding a solution, and the world would unite against a common enemy. But climate change is a slow-motion asteroid hitting over decades. Its impact is gradual, almost imperceptible in the short term, making it easy to ignore or downplay its significance. This gradual threat leads to creeping normalcy, a phenomenon where we slowly adjust to worsening conditions, accepting them as the new reality. Each year's disasters become the new normal. What was once considered an extreme event becomes commonplace, and we adapt our lives accordingly, often without fully realizing the extent of the changes. The effects are distant for many, particularly those in wealthier nations who are shielded from the immediate consequences of climate change. And the language is dry, filled with technical jargon and complex scientific concepts that are difficult for the average person to understand. 1. 5 degrees, parts per million. These terms, while scientifically accurate, often fail to convey the urgency and scale of the problem. It doesn't stir the soul. It lacks the emotional resonance needed to inspire widespread action and motivate people to make significant changes in their lives. The chain of cause and effect is invisible. It's hard to see how our everyday actions, like driving a car or using electricity, contribute to the larger problem of climate change. Our actions feel disconnected from global disasters. We see images of floods, droughts, and wildfires on the news, but they seem far removed from our own lives and choices. The benefits of our lifestyles are immediate, providing us with comfort, convenience, and pleasure in the present moment. The costs are delayed and distant, often borne by future generations or by communities in other parts of the world. Why sacrifice today for a diffuse future benefit? Why give up the comforts and conveniences we enjoy now for a problem that seems so far off and uncertain? It's a rational question, even if disastrous collectively. From an individual perspective, it may seem logical to prioritize immediate needs and desires over long-term environmental concerns. The problem is designed to be ignored by our short-term brains. Our brains are wired to focus on immediate threats and rewards, making it difficult to prioritize long-term abstract risks like climate change. So the evidence feels like background anxiety, a constant hum of worry that we learn to tune out in order to cope with the demands of daily life, not an urgent crisis. It doesn't trigger the same kind of immediate response as a fire, a flood, or an act of violence. It's a threat that's everywhere and nowhere, woven into the fabric of our daily lives, yet difficult to pinpoint or isolate. A ghost in the machine. It's a pervasive force that shapes our world in subtle but profound ways, often without our conscious awareness. Hard to panic about a ghost, right? It's difficult to mobilize against something that feels so intangible and distant. That's the challenge. Overcoming our inherent biases and limitations to recognize and address a threat that is slow, abstract, and seemingly distant. We need to make the invisible visible. We must find ways to translate the complex science of climate change into a language that resonates with people on an emotional level, and to connect our daily actions to the larger global crisis. Even if you deeply care about the environment, even if you're passionate about making a difference, there's a huge hurdle standing in the way: trust. It's a fundamental building block for any kind of collective action, and right now, it feels like it's in incredibly short supply. We were told from a young age to recycle diligently, change our light bulbs to more energy-efficient options, diligently bring our tote bags to the grocery store, only to later learn that our individual efforts barely make a dent, barely matter in the grand scheme of things, especially when compared to the staggering scale of corporate emissions. The pollution pumped out by factories and large industries dwarfs anything we can achieve through personal actions. It's like trying to bail out the Titanic, which is rapidly sinking with nothing more than a teaspoon. All while the captain of the ship is actively drilling more holes into the hull, exacerbating the problem. This realization breeds a sense of futility, a feeling that our actions are ultimately meaningless. Why even bother making these small sacrifices when the big players, the corporations and governments, seem to be doing absolutely nothing to address the root causes of the problem? Climate summits are held with great fanfare, and world leaders make grand, sweeping promises about reducing emissions, and transitioning to a greener future. But despite these pledges, global emissions continue to rise year after year, defying all the optimistic projections. Deadlines for achieving climate goals are routinely missed, and the pledges made at these summits often turn out to be hollow, lacking any real substance or enforcement mechanisms. We see oil executives attending climate summits, ostensibly to discuss solutions, and then witness the opening of new coal mines and the construction of new fossil fuel infrastructure shortly after these green speeches are made. This blatant hypocrisy breeds a deep sense of cynicism and distrust. If you don't trust the system, if you believe that the people in power are not genuinely committed to addressing the problem, then why bother engaging with it? Why vote for or support policies that you believe are nothing more than scams, designed to appease the public while doing little to actually solve the climate crisis? Greenwashing is absolutely everywhere we look, from oil companies running ads touting their commitment to renewable energy, to conscious fashion brands that still rely on unsustainable practices, to green banks that continue to invest in fossil fuels. We've been conditioned to expect a catch, to assume that there's always some hidden motive or deceptive practice lurking beneath the surface. Trust is so fundamentally broken across the board that even real, viable solutions to the climate crisis are often met with suspicion and skepticism. This triple disillusionment with individual action, with government policies, and with corporate behavior, ultimately leaves us feeling powerless and unable to affect meaningful change. People aren't apathetic about the climate crisis. They're demoralized by the perceived lack of genuine action and the pervasive sense of broken trust. So when new warnings about the impending consequences of climate change come out, the common reaction is often a shrug and a resigned, "What's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway." Therefore, in order to rebuild concern and inspire action, we must first and foremost rebuild trust in each other, in our institutions, and in the possibility of a better future. Now let's talk about the media. The media spotlight shapes what we care about, and lately, it's not on climate. If it bleeds, it leads. The media loves drama, immediacy, clear villains. Climate change is slow, diffuse, and messy. It doesn't fit the 24-hour news cycle. So it gets bumped for more exciting stories. If the media isn't talking about it, we assume it's not urgent. Even when covered, climate change is framed as a political debate, not a scientific reality. False balance, scientists versus deniers, creates fake controversy. Apocalyptic coverage can numb us, making the crisis feel hopeless. Disasters are reported as isolated events, not symptoms of a warming planet. The media rarely connects the dots, leaving us confused and detached. Their business model favors novelty over importance, conflict over consensus. The result, a public that's less informed, more apathetic, and thinks the problem has faded. The silence is deafening and dangerous. Let's talk about money, or the lack of it. It's hard to worry about the planet when you're worried about groceries. Economic pressures force people to focus on survival, not the Greenland ice sheet. Stagnant wages, rising costs, these are daily crises, not abstract threats. Climate action is often framed as a threat to jobs or another bill to pay. This creates a false choice, the economy or the environment. Most people will choose survival. Green solutions often seem like luxuries for the wealthy: electric cars, organic food, solar panels. Being eco-friendly feels like a status symbol, not an option for everyone. This class divide breeds resentment and makes climate action feel out of reach. People aren't ignoring climate change because they don't care, they simply can't afford to care. Real solutions must address economic realities: better jobs, lower bills, security. You can't ask people to save the world on an empty stomach. After all that, fatigue, invisibility, broken trust, media silence, economic pain, it's no wonder climate change has slipped off the radar. Recognizing these reasons isn't an excuse, it's a diagnosis. Ignoring the problem is dangerous. The laws of physics don't care about our attention span, but shouting louder won't work. We need hope, not just fear. Tell stories that connect climate action to real-life benefits: cleaner air, lower bills, better jobs. Highlight solutions and the people making them happen. We must believe our actions matter, individually and collectively. Stay informed, seek solutions, talk about climate as a local, personal issue. The path out of apathy is paved with hope and action. It's a tough climb, but it's the only way to a future worth having. Thanks for watching.